If you're currently planning to take your first cruise, then don't worry. Everybody knows that the topic of cruise ship accommodation or cruise ship cabins is a complete minefield. There are so many things that you can get very, very right, and there are also so many things that unfortunately you can get very, very wrong. That means that there is so much for you to think about, and it's totally okay for you to perhaps feel a little bit confused. In this video today, I'm going to share with you 15 things that I think every new cruiser really should know about cruise ship cabins. Hopefully, this video will reassure you that there is so much information out there to help you on the journey of planning your first cruise. If you've just found me today for the first time, then I'm Fraser and I use my YouTube channel to share my cruise experiences with you to hopefully help you to plan and have the best cruise possible. If you like the sound of that, then it would be great if you would think about supporting my channel by clicking both the thumbs up and the subscribe buttons. Anyway, let's get started with the first of 15 things that every new cruiser should know about cruise ship cabins, and that is that a cruise ship cabin and a cruise ship stateroom are exactly the same thing. That's right, it's as simple as that. When I started cruising, I was sailing on cruise ships that knew a room as a passenger cabin. The more established I got throughout my cruise career, I then started to travel on ships that were owned by American cruise lines, to be honest. And I found that most of those cruise ships knew a passenger room, like the one I'm in right now, as a passenger stateroom. I got so confused because I thought there must be differences here. Why do some call it a cabin and others call it a stateroom? But take it from me, don't worry, a cabin and a stateroom are exactly the same thing. Now moving on to the second thing that all new cruisers should know about cruise ship cabins. This is where the differences do start to come in. This might get relatively complicated, but hear me out. When you choose which type of cruise ship cabin to stay in, there are, generally speaking, 4 different types on most cruise ships. First, you've got inside cabins, in other words, rooms on the inside of the ship with no window. Second, you've got ocean view or outside cabins, in other words, rooms with a window. Third, you've got balcony cabins. Yes, that name is very self-explanatory. That means that those rooms or those cabins will have their own private balcony. And finally, you've got suites, which are usually the highest, most prestigious rooms on board. When you then look at grades of cabin type, you'll find that there are a number of different grades under each of the types that we've just mentioned. For example, the cruise ship that I'm coming to you from in this video has 5 different grades of inside cabin. That means that if you were to book an inside cabin or a room with no window, you would then be asked to choose which specific grade of cabin you'd be interested in. That's right, one of 5 different types of room with no window. How on earth would you decide? Well, don't worry, it's usually relatively self-explanatory and relatively easy to figure out what the grading systems mean. You'll find that the higher grades will usually be rooms that are located in better locations on the ship. For example, you'll find the higher grade inside cabins on this ship located towards the middle of the ship, where it's widely known that you'll experience less motion. You'll also find the lower grades of inside cabins closer to some of the noisier venues on board, so you might find them underneath the buffet restaurant or above the main theatre. If you're dealing with a travel agent when you book your cruise, then they will be absolutely more than equipped to advise you on that, so just ask the question and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. The third thing that all new cruisers should know about cruise ship cabins is on the topic of bed configuration. When you book a cruise, you will usually be asked whether you would like your beds to be set out as a double or a twin formation. That means that you will either walk into the room and find 1 large bed or 2 separate beds. On almost every cruise ship that I've ever travelled on, if you select the double format, then you'll find that it will be 2 single beds, or sometimes slightly larger than single beds, that will be pushed together to form 1 bed. That means that if you do make the wrong decision at the point of booking, then you can usually, once you get on board, have that room split out. I recently took a cruise with a friend where we would obviously want to have a twin room set up, But when we walked in, the beds were together, and it was very much set up as a room that would be much better for a couple to be cruising. It was very easy for us to say to our cabin attendant, would you mind separating the beds? That was done within about 10 minutes, and we were back to business as normal. Now, it's very important that you remember that not all cruise ship cabins allow you that flexibility. The one that I'm in at the moment, you might be able to see I've got one bed over here and one bed over here. And this cabin is actually set up as a twin room with two single beds, but one is on one wall and one is on the other. These beds are completely fixed and these can't be moved, but that is very clear at the point of making your booking on this very specific cruise ship. So just make sure when you are looking at bed configuration, you try to make the right decision at the point of booking, but also just check if you're cruising in a room with a fixed format, just to make sure that you don't make a mistake. Number 4, let's talk about power. Every cruise ship cabin will offer you power so that you can charge appliances, you can work from the cabin, you can run whatever you need on a mains power source. Now, I meet lots of people on cruise ships who assume that the plug that they would have on their appliance from home will go into a cruise ship outlet, but that isn't always the case at all. You'll find that some cruise ships will operate with European plug points, some will operate with American, some will operate with Australian, some will offer with British. There are so many different variations. It's really important that you pack an international travel adapter to make sure that you can access the power points in your cabin. The one that I would recommend is one similar to this. This essentially allows you to select whichever region you're currently travelling in to pop out the relevant plug points for that location. You can find these available on websites like Amazon, and in fact, I've got this exact item listed in my Amazon store. I take this everywhere with me because regardless of where I am in the world, I should be able to access power by simply sliding the adapter to allow me to have the relevant plug points appear. Now, you can find the link to my Amazon store down in the description of this video, and you can also find it in a pinned comment down in the comment section. So hopefully you'll find that tip useful. Number 5, let's talk about housekeeping. The 5th thing that you should know as a new cruiser is that your cruise ship cabin will be serviced every single day by a cabin attendant. Some cruise lines will have one service per day, but the majority will have 2. If you're on a cruise ship that offers one cabin attendant housekeeping visit per day, then that will usually take place once you're out of bed and out of the cabin for the day. That means that they'll come in, they'll make up your beds, they'll change your towels, they'll clean the room generally. And if you're then on a ship that offers 2 housekeeping visits, you'll also get a turn down service. So your attendant will come back in the evening, probably when you're at dinner. They'll then turn down your bed, they'll maybe replace your towels again. It's really important to just note when you get on board, do you have 1 visit or 2? Because there's nothing worse than waking up in the morning and realising that there wasn't a turn down service and you've left your wet towel on the floor. So housekeeping will happen every day on your cruise, but just check when you get on if your ship is 1 visit per day or 2. Number 6, and this one is so important for anybody cruising from the UK. Some cruise ship cabins will offer you tea and coffee making facilities in the room, but they won't all offer that. Generally speaking, if you're cruising on a ship that's based out of a UK port for any length of time, then you'll find that that cruise line will put things like a kettle and some basic tea and coffee making options in your cabin. That means that, yes, the Brits among us who love a cup of tea or a cup of coffee before heading out in the morning, we can relax in the room with that drink without having to go to, for example, the main dining room to get our coffee with breakfast. It is also quite important to note that there are some cruise ships out there that do carry kettles and they do carry tea and coffee making facilities that they can put into your cabin. I've previously found with one of the really famous European lines that I didn't expect to carry a kettle. I took a cruise from Dubai and I asked for a kettle to be delivered to the room, and I was pretty shocked when one actually did turn up. So if you'd like a kettle to be delivered to your cabin, ask the question. Worst case scenario, they say no. Number 7, if you'd like to look outside from your cabin, then don't worry, you don't always have to book a room with a window, and you don't always have to book a balcony cabin. In fact, you can see outside the ship just fine from an inside cabin. Now, how does that work, I hear you ask? Well, it's pretty straightforward. Most cruise ship cabins will have a television, and mine is mounted on this wall here. On that television, they will then have a camera positioned up in the bridge at the front of the ship, and that camera will show the view from the bridge. That means that as your ship is sailing into port, sailing out of port, or docked in port, or enjoying a day at sea, you can still have a look at what's going on outside. That helps so many people that I know who are a little bit nervous about staying in a room with no window, because that at least makes them feel as though they can see the outside. The 8th thing that every new cruiser should know about cruise ship cabins is that you'll usually have the ability to select from a couple of different pillow types on board. Most cruise lines will either offer you the option of selecting pillows from a pillow menu, or having the option to call guest services or call housekeeping to request things like firmer pillows. You'll often find that some cruise lines, for example, MSC Cruises, will supply you with a number of different pillows in the cabin on day 1. You'll find that on the bed, when it's made up when you embark the ship, one of the pillows will be softer, one of the pillows will be firmer, and if you need any more of a certain pillow type, just ask your cabin attendant, and it will be absolutely fine to pop another pillow in your cabin. The 9th thing that every new cruiser should know about cruise ship cabins, and some of you, if you're watching this and you have taken a cruise before, you might know this is coming because my comments section on YouTube can make me laugh fairly frequently on this topic, and that is that cruise ship cabin toilet systems operate using a vacuum system. That means that, yes, first of all, when you push that button in the bathroom, it will sound similar to when you push the button on an aircraft toilet. It will generate quite a lot of noise, but the most important thing to remember here is that you need to really try to limit the quantities of paper and things that you're putting down that toilet in order to prevent a blockage. Now, don't worry, that doesn't mean that you can't use paper in the bathroom. All that means is that you maybe just have to flush a little more frequently to avoid any blockages, especially if you're cruising on an older ship. So yes, let's move on from the topic of toilets, but just remember they operate on a vacuum system. The 10th thing that you should think about if you're planning to take a cruise for the first time is that the walls in your cabin are usually much thinner than what you would find at hotels on land. That is probably just for the simple reason that you're on a ship, so there's not the same degree of insulation behind these walls. I haven't ever really had it where that's caused a significant issue, but it is worth remembering when you are making your own noise in your cabin that those around you might hear you. And yes, that might also mean that when you sing in the shower, that noise might travel through the wall. The other point that I would make about the walls in your cabin is that lots of people don't know that they are usually, and in the case of this cruise they're usually metal, which means that they'll be magnetic. I always travel with magnetic hooks that allow me to put things like the paperwork that I receive every day on board on the wall, rather than leaving it lying around the desk and looking really messy. If you'd like to get some magnetic hooks, then you can also find them over in my Amazon store. Check out the description of this video. Number 11, in a cruise ship cabin, you will have a cabin phone. It's free to call any other cabins on board, but I wouldn't recommend calling ashore because that can be particularly expensive. Yes, okay, if you need to call ashore, you absolutely can do that, but I wouldn't. It's far cheaper for you to use your mobile phone than what it would be to call using the cabin phone. Now, that said, if you're at sea, you obviously will struggle to use your phone, so there are other options. You could look at WhatsApp calling if you've got internet on board. But yes, cruise ship phones can be pretty expensive. I'm not sure why I'm pointing over there, because you can see mine over there. So yes, you'll always have a cabin phone in your room. It's free to call anyone else, free to call the facilities on board, but don't call home. Number 12. all cruise ship cabins will usually feature a safe or a safety deposit unit. It's really important, in my opinion, that every cruiser looks to use that for storage of things like passports, money. There are so many things that if they go missing when you're on your cruise, they could cause a real problem. I can't think of anything worse than coming back to my room and realising that the passport I'd left on my desk isn't there anymore. Now, don't worry, I have never, touch wood, had any issues with theft on cruise ships. My cabin has always felt completely safe. Nobody, other than my cabin attendant, has ever entered my cabin. However, I do believe pretty strongly that it's important to just take some basic precautions to avoid falling foul to an accident. So yes, safe, usually in the cupboard or the drawer, use it. Number 13, one of the things that I get asked so often by new first-time cruisers is, will there be towels in my room, or do I need to take them? Now, you might be listening to that and thinking, of course there's towels. However, a lot of people ask specifically about pool towels or beach towels, not necessarily the towels that you would use in the shower, in the bathroom. All of the cruise ships that I've ever travelled on have supplied you with both bath towels and also pool or beach towels. It's really important that if you do take that pool or beach towel out of your cabin to the pool or the beach, that you return that towel to your cabin before you leave the ship. If you don't do that, then you might face, in some cases, a relatively significant fine. I've been on ships that will charge you $25 or $35 US if you fail to leave that pool towel in your room. So yes, don't worry, you'll find those towels in your room for you on embarkation day, or you'll find them available by the swimming pool, but just make sure that you don't take them off with you and don't bring them back, otherwise you might be charged. The 14th thing that you should know as a first-time cruiser about cruise ship cabins is that, and this might sound silly, they move. This might sound a little strange, but there are so many things that you could leave on your cruise ship desk, or you could leave on the units in your bathroom on your cruise ship, that if they fall, that could cause a bit of a problem. I'm thinking about things like perfumes, or bottles of alcohol, or bottles of water, or maybe ornaments that you've bought when you've gone ashore. There are lots of things that I personally wouldn't want to fall onto the floor. An example from me personally is that I travel with my laptop. If the ship is moving and we are experiencing rough seas, I want that laptop to be really, really safe, so it will always be stored in a drawer when I cruise. I would never leave that laptop just sitting out. If you have everything not necessarily locked away, but just closed away, it not only makes your cabin tidier and easier to find things, but it just makes it way less prone to damage, I guess. In the bathroom, you'll find that you'll usually have shelves that will have a guardrail, and that guardrail is usually there so that when the ship moves, your toiletries will remain on the shelf. So there are things in place to keep everything where it should be when you cruise on a moving ship. Take advantage of them and just keep your things in the right place. Number 15. The final thing on this list that I think every first time or new cruiser should know about cruise ship cabins is that these cabins can be louder than your house when you're on land. Now, what do I mean by that? Because we've already covered the noise coming through the walls. Well, slightly different things, like you might be more likely to hear noise coming through from underneath the door of your cabin. You might also find that if you're on particularly an older ship, the room might creak a little when the ship's moving. That's totally normal. In my case, on the cruise I'm on at the moment, I'm staying in a porthole cabin, which means that my room is quite low down on the ship, and I'm actually relatively close to the waterline. That means that I can hear, even right now, but particularly when I go to bed, I can hear the water hitting off the side of the ship. Now, how I get around that is, this week has been absolutely fine. I've slept amazing on here, but for all of the cruises I go on, I just pack some disposable earplugs that I can then use if the noise is annoying me at night. I've had a few cabins over my time which have been slightly annoying, but I've never really had any significant problems when it comes to noise. And that's it. That's 15 things that I think every new or first-time cruiser should really know about cruise ship cabins. I actually wish I knew a lot of those things before I took my first cruise, because I remember how nervous I was when I first got on board. And looking back, there wasn't really any need for me to be. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video today, and if you have, as I mentioned earlier, it would be great if you would support my channel by clicking both the thumbs up and the subscribe buttons. If you'd like to learn more, staying on the topic of cruise ship cabins, then why not come and join me over in this video? Here, I share with you 15 things that I think it's so important that every cruiser does as soon as they get into their cabin on day one of their cruise. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I'll hopefully see you over there.